Well, hello folks, this is Sejasvi back with another video. Today we are going to discuss everything that is going wrong with Intel. Before we proceed, I would like to share an article with you. Well, according to Bloomberg, Intel plunges as it weighs exit from manufacturing chips. Yes, you heard me correct. Intel is actually looking to exit the chip manufacturing. Let's read further. CEO Bob Swan spent almost an hour on Thursday discussing the idea that would once have been unthinkable for the world's largest semiconductor company, not manufacturing its own chips. Intel is actually looking to outsource chip manufacturing to other companies. Intel shares tumbled as much as 18% Friday morning. Outsourcing is the norm in the 400 billion industry nowadays, but for 50 years, Intel has combined chip design with in-house production. Well, yes, Intel has been manufacturing chips for the past 50 years. And until recently, Intel was even planning to churn out processor for others. Well, Intel even tried to make smartphone processors and failed miserably. Intel should have given it another try, I believe. Anyways, to the extent that we need to use somebody else's process technology and we call those contingency plans, we will be prepared to do that. Pursuing this option would represent a huge shift in the industry and the end of Intel's biggest differentiator. Well, yes, everybody else outsources chip manufacturing to other companies. Intel was the only one manufacturing its own chips. And now, if Intel is looking to outsource manufacturing, it's well, there is no difference between Intel and others now, I believe. Design can only do so much for semiconductor performance. The manufacturing step is crucial to ensuring these components and all that. Well, I came across another news I'd like to share with you all. As we all know, AMD Ryzen processors are based on 7 nanometer manufacturing process. The Ryzen 5, I'm talking about the series 4000 processors, which are shipping with 2020 laptops. Intel should have actually launched 7 nanometer processors by now, but no, Intel is 2 or 3 years behind schedule. As this news suggests, Intel next generation 7 nanometer chips are delayed until at least 2022, folks. 2022. That means by the time Intel launches 7 nanometer, the competition would have moved on to 5 nanometer manufacturing. And that is a bad thing. Intel finally got its 10 nanometer chipsets on the market after years of delays, but now the company has announced that it has encountered issues with its upcoming 7 nanometer process that will result in delays for the next gen of chips too. As Intel Q2 2020 earning release notes, the company's 7 nanometer based CPU product timing is shifting approximately 6 months relative to prior expectations, pushing them back to an originally planned arrival at the end of 2021. If you ask me, folks, the end of 2021 is also pretty late for 7 nanometer chips, because Apple with its new upcoming MacBooks in October is planning to shift its manufacturing to 5 nanometer process, and Intel is still manufacturing on 10th. That means Intel is at least 2 generations behind. Reading on, Intel actually says that the issues with current 7 nanometer production means that production is trending a year behind its internal roadmap. Well, of course it is. Intel should have come up with 7 nanometer processors by now. For some reason though, the company says that being a year behind schedule will still only result in that aforementioned 6-month delay to the market. Well, here's the thing, folks. Intel 10 nanometer chips were already delayed. They were a year or two behind schedule. Till then, I suppose until 2 years ago, Intel was manufacturing on the same 14 nanometer process. whereas the competition was manufacturing on 10 nanometer, and now Intel is manufacturing on 10, whereas the competition is manufacturing on 7, and with Apple Silicon, competition is moving towards manufacturing on 5 nanometers. So again, Intel is 2 generations behind. Anyways, let's discuss everything that's wrong with Intel. With the pros and cons, of course. Well, as we can see, there are 3 types of processors in the market. When I'm talking about processors, I'm talking about desktop processors, laptop processors, not mobile processors. Namely Intel, AMD, and ARM. ARM is an architecture, folks, the architecture that our mobile devices use. So ARM based processors are essentially mobile based processors. Anyways, let's have a look here, folks. Compatibility being one of the most important processor brand names in the market, Intel CPUs are available widely. This provides consumers with more flexible ability of PC choices. Here's the pros of Intel CPUs, just in case you're wondering. Compatibility, compatible with a wide variety of hardware and software. Power consumption, Intel processors in notebook computers are not electricity intensive, using less power. This is a joke, guys. Intel processors they consume a bit of power, but saying that AMD uses double to triple the wattage is somewhat of an exaggeration. I highly doubt it. Moreover, heat generation due to lower wattage consumption, the Intel processing chips generate less heat. This is a blatant lie. Intel processors need a whole lot of fans, and rarely do they maintain their base clock speed. That's the truth, folks. When Intel sells you a processor with up to 3.4 gigahertz turbo boost, it's a freaking lie. Your laptop would never reach 3.4 gigahertz unless, of course, you are using your laptop in Alaska, or for that case, if you're sitting in the refrigerator. Intel processors heat up like crazy. That's the reason why MacBooks are having so many heating problems. Anyways, yes, one thing I can agree is the production capacity. As Intel is the largest semiconductor manufacturer, it has 15 CPU development plants globally, which is a huge deal if you ask me. Intel can generate a higher fabrication volume, meaning that their CPUs are going to be available more widely and used in a significant number of machines. All right. And then, of course, there are integrated graphics in Intel processors. That is a bonus. Even if you are buying a processor without a graphics card, you can still do some sort of graphic intensive stuff. If you're doing a whole lot of graphic intensive stuff, of course you need a graphics card for that. Generally, when you're looking at CPU, it comes down to either AMD or Intel. One thing that gives Intel an upper hand is it comes with integrated Iris graphics. Yes, folks, Iris graphics is really nice integrated graphics, if you ask me. It's a really capable graphics that they're giving, in the processor, and it doesn't need any other hardware because it is integrated in the CPU. That means you can straight go to gaming or streaming high quality video without a GPU. Well, I can't promise about gaming, but yes, streaming a high quality video, well, it's possible. But don't expect to stream 8K and stuff like that. For that, you need a graphics card. Well, with pros, there are some cons also for Intel. Number one con being availability. On the darker side of high production capacity, there is also another factor involved. Being in higher demand means that there is a lot of manufacturers competing for the finite volume of Intel processors. Well, when new Intel processors are launched, all the manufacturers have to order processors from Intel, and that leads to, well, as you can say, everybody is trying to get their hands first on the latest processor. So that leads to some sort of issue for smaller manufacturers when it comes to availability. Well, of course, then there is the issue of power drain. Well, in notebook CPUs, there is not much power drain, but in desktop CPUs, Intel consumes a whole lot of power. They are electricity intensive, generating more heat and therefore causing the PC cooling systems to work overtime. Well, we have seen this. Then Intel CPUs generate a whole lot of heat, as I mentioned before. Then there is the price segment. Intel processors are generally priced higher than AMD counterparts. The multi-core processors use more energy, and the brand name commands to a higher market price. You see, everybody knows about Intel. They are taking advantage of their brand name. The higher the processor price, the more it costs for PC manufacturers to build a PC. Because if you're buying a PC with an i7 or i9 processor, manufacturers need to compensate for the graphics by providing you a graphics card as well. Because at that cost, selling a PC without a graphics card would result in, well, abysmal sale, if I can say that. And one major con that I feel about Intel is that it is still being manufactured at 10 nanometers. AMD Ryzen is based on 7 nanometers, and Apple is launching Apple Silicon with 5 nanometers. So Intel still using 10 nanometers. That's a shame. Not just now, until 2022, folks, until 2022. That's a whole 2-year gap before we actually see 7 nanometer manufacturing from Intel. I believe by that time AMD would have shifted to 5 nanometer manufacturing. That means Intel in a way is 2 to 3 generations behind. Well, enough talk about Intel. Let's talk about AMD. Well, one of the major pros about AMD is it's cheaper. Yes, folks, AMD processors are generally cheaper, and AMD have superior graphics. Well, it is true, guys, because AMD makes graphics card as well. So it's a graphics card company like NVIDIA, and it of course provides superior graphics in its processors. And it simply means that you can play high quality games without stutters, etc. on your AMD laptop compared to Intel. Well, AMD processors can detect malware. That is a major pro for AMD. Along with the cheaper price, the quality of AMD is better and suitable for playing games, as it makes the graphics display of the game more interesting if it is with the AMD processor, as we mentioned before. AMD processors have a feature called enhanced virus protection, something which Intel lacks, which can detect virus and malwares. The feature helps to check whether there is a virus content in the running program. And then AMD processors can handle 64 content better than Intel. We're talking about 64-bit applications and all. It's just a matter that AMD has been well optimized for 64-bit. And the major pro, guys, AMD is based on 7 nanometer chip. manufacturing process. It's a major pro, folks. The slimmer the CPU, the less the heat generation. Generally, that's the thumb rule, and it can be seen with the new AMD Ryzen 5 laptops that they generate a whole lot less heat and they maintain their base clock speed better than Intel counterparts. Well, let's talk about the cons of AMD. Well, not everyone knows about AMD. That's a major con. But everybody knows about Intel. They have been using Intel processors, Intel laptops for years now. Well, it says that AMD has faster heat generation, but in my experience, folks, the AMD Ryzen 5s smokes Intel out of the water, because you see, Intel Ryzen 5 is actually running 5 to 10 degrees cooler than Intel counterparts. So I believe that is why I have put it in red. Until last year, yes, AMD processors used to heat a lot, and AMD was not recommended for tropical countries like India and well, hot countries like Australia, Dubai, etc. I mean UAE, etc. Moreover, as you can see, I've written here, the AMD Ryzen 5 series 4000 processors actually run cooler and maintain base clock speed, unlike Intel. Yes, Intel really struggles to maintain base clock speed. Well, where AMD loses is in multimedia, because Intel is much more preferable, as it is specifically designed for multimedia consumption. As you can see that I have mentioned 7 nanometer process in both pros and cons when talking about AMD. That is because it can be a pro when we are comparing with Intel, and it can be a con when we are comparing with ARM, because now the ARM Apple Silicon is coming on a 5 nanometer process. Well, does that mean that we should go for ARM? Does that mean that AMD is better? Well, no, folks. Let's discuss about ARM as well. Well, ARM, there is only one processor available in the market as of now, that is the Snapdragon 8CX, and we are going to use that for reference sake. Snapdragon 8CX is a desktop class CPU from a mobile chip manufacturer, Qualcomm. Well, what essentially this ARM succeeds in is always connected PC, which is the 4G and 5G. You can just pop in a SIM card and get 4G or 5G signal wherever you are, irrespective of whether you have access to Wi-Fi or not. That is something you can't do in Intel or AMD based machines. Another advantage that ARM has over AMD or Intel is that it is fanless. As you know that Snapdragon makes processors for our mobile devices, and mobile devices don't have fans. So Snapdragon has a history of optimizing processors that actually run cooler and don't need a fan. Well, yes, one of the main advantages of using Snapdragon processors is that insane battery life, up to 20 hours. You see, Samsung recently launched a Galaxy Book model with the Snapdragon 8CX processor, I believe, and that has an insane battery life, folks. Insane, up to 20 hours, perhaps even exceeding that, up to 22. Well, Snapdragon processors never have an issue with speed, unlike AMD or Intel. Well, AMD also doesn't have an issue with speed. It is basically an Intel thing. Well, 8CX has half the power consumption. Well, that is to be expected, as Snapdragon makes mobile chipsets, and Snapdragon chipsets are well optimized so that they don't drain smartphone batteries. Of course, it is to be expected that they have less power consumption. Well, in graphics benchmark, HCX beat Intel by a good amount. Well, that is expected, folks, because with the 865 and 855 and stuff like that, they are top of the line CPUs, and they are excellent when it comes to graphics. And of course, this is the 8 series CPU, which is powering the laptop, so better graphics is to be expected from it. Extremely fast boot up speed. Well, that is to be expected because it just takes a couple of seconds to boot up your device. Same is the case with laptops. The upcoming Apple Silicon will be based on 5 nanometer process, as we discussed earlier. Snapdragon makes really tiny, minuscule processors, as you know, for the smartphone. And the same tiny, minuscule processor can be put in a laptop as well, though not as tiny, of course, but nonetheless tiny as compared to Intel or AMD counterparts. So one of the pros of HCX is that it is ultra portable. By putting Snapdragon processors, you don't even need a fan, you don't need a big battery, you don't need a whole lot of ports, so it's extremely portable. You can really slim down your laptop thickness. Well, that means ARM is better. Well, no, folks, it is quite complicated. Snapdragon HCX processors can also remain active while in hibernation, whereas standard laptop with Intel or AMD simply goes to sleep. That means that Snapdragon processors consume some battery power while in hibernation as well. They are syncing up your account and doing all sort of random things. Then there is a stutter or stumbling while using heavy applications. Well, of course, this is to be expected, guys, because Snapdragon makes mobile CPUs. Intel makes desktop CPUs. Intel has been making desktop CPUs for years. And HCX, if you open Final Cut Pro, well, it's really going to struggle. That is to be expected. It's a 5 gig application. What do you expect? Moreover, graphics prowess of Snapdragon or ARM chipsets is somewhat lacking when compared to Intel or AMD counterparts. Well, AMD makes graphics card, folks. AMD is a graphic card company. Intel is not. Hence, better graphics are expected from AMD. Before you head over to the market to buy the latest Intel processors, think. Intel is 2 to 3 generations behind. Think. Give AMD a chance. It won't disappoint you, folks. If you liked what you saw, there's more where that came from. Head over to my channel and watch my previously uploaded videos. We upload new videos Monday to Saturday. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. A comment would be really appreciated. Comment if you'd like me make videos on a particular topic. Share this video with your friends and family, and subscribe if you haven't already. This is your host, Tejasvi Kapoor, signing off.